Salvaged Steel is a top-down roguelike shooter where you control mechs and tanks, and the main mechanic of the game is you basically blow up enemy tanks and they'll drop their body parts, and you use their body parts to heal and upgrade your mech. And each of these parts will have their own unique attributes such as health and speed. The game originally started out as a project for my college classes, and ever since I've been working on the game little by little, trying to turn the game from this little demo into a full-on commercial Steam game. In this devlog, I'm going to show you how I took my college demo from this to this. Here's how I did it. First thing I did is I got rid of this old level. It's bad, it looks bad, and it violates the key principle of a roguelike, which is randomly generated levels. So I got rid of it and replaced it with this. This is basically a level generator that I made using the Drunkard's Walk method. And the Drunkard's Walk method, for those who are unaware, is basically exactly what it sounds like. Basically how it works is you have a grid, an invisible grid, made up of tiles, and you have a walker object that goes around this grid, and each tile that it goes in, it marks it as carved. And then when the level generates, it loops through all these tiles, looking for ones that are marked and unmarked, and the ones that are marked, they don't have walls, and the ones that aren't marked do have walls. And this is how the levels are made. It's very basic, but it gets the job done. And then for all the empty spaces that the walker carves out, I just had empty game objects spawn those, which will act as spawn points for the enemies. The next thing I did was make improvements to the enemy AI. The current AI that I had in the demo, it wasn't that great. It was basically like a fancy zombie, essentially. But instead of pathing directly to the player, what I did is I had it path to a random position and a radius around the player, which will give the illusion that the enemy is trying to flank the player, rather than traveling directly to the player. And this flank position will be calculated every couple of seconds, so that way it's not generating new positions every second and causing performance issues. And this worked for the demo, but it's very basic, and it'll just path straight towards you, regardless of the distance. There's no line of sight checking or anything like that. So I added this vision cone that basically, if the player is within this cone, it will send a raycast to the player, and if anything is obstructing the raycast, then the enemy won't see it, but if it does see it, then the enemy will path towards the player. And if the enemy is pathing towards the player and it moves out of sight, then the enemy will move to the player's last known position in a search state. And if it doesn't find the player, then it will return back to a patrol state, where every couple of seconds it will pick a random empty position on the map and move towards it. Once I got the code for the level generation and AI finished, I figured that the game was at a good enough spot to where I could use this as a solid foundation to build my game off of. It's hard for me to stay motivated when the game looks, well, like this. Everything's just kind of like very abstract, very low poly. There's no textures, everything's just flat color shaded. And it's very hard for me to stay motivated when the game just looks dull. So the next thing I did is I really wanted to nail down the art style for the game. And what I was envisioning is the game would be kind of like a low poly PS1 art style. And I basically got these assets from a previous game that I made and imported them into the game. And I made this nice, cool, snowy landscape. I also made textures for the enemies, giving them this nice pixelated snow camo. And on top of that, I also made a new heads-up display and replaced the old one. I wanted this new heads-up display to be very kind of like cyberpunk-y looking. I wanted it to be sharp and pixelated, and I think it fits the game pretty well. The next thing I did was work on the particle effects. The current particle effects that I had in the demo, they weren't that good. The enemies would just explode into these like massive, just like poofs of like yellow and orange and white fireballs, and it just didn't look good, and the particles would obscure your vision, and they would linger there for a while, and they just looked really bad. So I got rid of them, and I spent the next couple of days working on just adding in like really nice looking particle effects to make the game look better. And needless to say, I went pretty overboard with the particle effects. After I got the art style nailed down, I shifted my attention back to the items. I wanted to add in more items to the game, just to get some variety in there. Ever since I started the game, I always wanted to have an enemy that shoots mortar shells, which I thought would be pretty cool. So I worked on that next, and it was an absolute nightmare. It took me like 5 days to do, but in the end it was worth it. And it's actually pretty simple. Basically how it works is the enemy generates a parabola, and a series of points are created on that parabola, and when the enemy fires the mortar shell will travel to each of the points on the parabola in order, and it will arrive at the destination. After that, I made a mission system, and basically how the missions work is the game will choose a random mission once we start up the game. Right now, the only 2 missions that I have are a time limit, one where you have to survive for a certain amount of time, and then I have one where you have to kill a certain amount of enemies. However, the underlying code for the mission system is very modular, so I can have missions in the future where you could have like an escort mission, or like a mission where you have to destroy a certain amount of buildings. But for right now, these will do. And basically once the mission is complete, the boss will spawn in. The boss fight was pretty cool. Basically what I did was take the code for the artillery, and I'd have this main attack where the boss will stop and shoot multiple volleys of artillery shells at the player in a giant circle. Since the boss shoots explosives from the top of its back, I decided to call it the flak back. The player can bait the flak back into destroying itself by getting close to it, causing the boss to shoot rockets at his feet. However, this proved to be too easy initially, since the player could just tire on the boss while the boss shot itself, so I gave the boss a heavy machine gun under its belly that will constantly shoot slow-moving but hard-hitting projectiles at the player, forcing the player to move. And in order to damage the boss, you have to shoot its feet. I also made these drop pods that spawn in the player and enemies, as well as its respawn sequence. Lastly, I compiled the game and got to work on this video. I'd just like to apologize for the bad audio quality and video editing. Over half the voiceovers were recorded in a sketchy truck stop outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Also currently on a month-long camping trip with my dad, and we're heading up to the Arctic Ocean, so I only have about an hour or 2 each day to edit. I'm capable of way better quality, so I promise the next video will be much better. I also upload a copy of the game to my itch.io page, so if you could download it and check it out, and playtest it for me and give me some feedback, that would be much appreciated. However, just be warned that the game was probably full of plenty of bugs I haven't found yet. The link to the game is in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out, YouTube.